Beyond Clean offers a creative look into the inner workings of a healthcare industry committed to getting it right every instrument, every time. Join us every week as we explore the hidden world of one of the most important aspects of safe surgical care. And now your hosts, Michael Matthews, Hank Balch, and Justin Poulin.
This week on Beyond Clean, we are celebrating our first year anniversary of the podcast. It's our 52nd episode. And Hank and Mike, I think everybody probably wants to hear a little bit about how we got started, how this all came about, maybe some surprises along the way. And we're going to sprinkle in a number of quotes from our guests from the very first year throughout this episode, and also have a couple of announcements about what year 2 is going to look like. Maybe if you want to get some Beyond Clean swag, we're going to talk about that. So we have a few announcements to make throughout the show as well, but we're going to treat this a little bit more like a montage. We're going to have clips of us talking about different topics, and then sprinkled in between, we'll have quotes from all of the episodes throughout the year. I think the first thing we have to say, though, is thank you to everybody that was a guest on the show or supported the show. I know we got a pretty good response of listeners right out of the gate, and I would say the same in terms of high-quality guests that were supporting us in the early going as well. I was surprised at how quickly we hit the ground running.
That's right, Justin. If you were to ask me how we made it, going back to what you just said, we had fantastic guests. I think I've mentioned before on the show, it took me a couple of episodes to realize this thing's not about me, it's not about us, it's about this fantastic all-star expert that we have in front of the audience, anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the length of the show. And we get to throw hardballs at them, we get to throw some softballs at them, have a little fun. But at the end of the day, we get to bring experts in front of sterile processing professionals around the globe, and we get to show off all their many years of study and expertise and experience. And then at the end of the day, close it and get the credit for it. Like, that's the best job in the world. And I think that's obviously the reason that we have done so well, is that the folks who have come on the show really bring an energy of their own and an excitement of their own. And I think the audience just really responded to that throughout the year.
Well, before he was a host, he was a guest. Mike, you were our very first guest on the podcast, and obviously good friends Sean Flynn and Brian Reed were part of the 3 podcasts that we released all at once to kick it off. But how much pressure was it on you to be the very first guest of Beyond Clean, and how do you look back on that now that you've joined the team?
I didn't really feel like there was a lot of pressure because I was the first one. So I think there was this general understanding that I'm probably going to be the worst. So I didn't really feel like there was a whole lot that could go wrong. Of course, one of the great things about doing a podcast is that obviously if you say something stupid or get lost in your thoughts, which I do very often, we can cut that out, edit it down to where it actually sounds really nice and smooth on the outside. That's one of the great things that really takes the pressure off of the guests, knowing that we can have these conversations. And I mean, if you do lose yourself, that's okay, because we can always make you sound great.
All right. Well, a reminder to everybody before we get too deep into this episode, you can subscribe to Beyond Clean on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, or you can search for Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast application. We can also be heard on the Sterile Ed app, available on iTunes and Android. Just look for Sterile Education in your app marketplace. You can follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info, Facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast, LinkedIn.com/company/Beyond Clean. Instagram is Beyond Clean Podcast. And finally, if you have feedback about our first year in the making of the podcast, or if you have a guest or topic that you'd like to recommend for a future show, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net.
I don't think a lot of people want to talk about this, but I really feel the majority of the challenges that we see today in sterile processing is a lack of understanding by administration of the importance of sterile processing, and I don't understand that.
I got to tell you the story. I got a 10-year-old daughter. When I come home every day at dinner, 6:30. She calls me Nessie. She goes, Nessie, tell me, how many lives did you save today? How many lives did you change? Tell me out of all the cases, like if I'm the doctor,
I always say, Hank and Justin and Michael, you can't clean what you can't see. And too many times, we're throwing brushes down lumens that are 1.5, 2 millimeters. You don't know what's down that lumen. That's why they have microscopes on every workstation.
You two are going to help get the profession where it needs to be over the next many years and keep this stuff up.
Okay, we're back, and don't adjust your not listening knobs there because it is me that's actually starting off the podcast segment this time. And the reason is because one of the most common questions that we get is, how did it all start? And since it all started with Hank and Justin, I thought it would only be fair that I would be the one who asked them this exact same question. So, Justin, this was not your first experience with podcasting. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd been podcasting since back in 2003, 2004, and I never really thought about it as something that I would bring into maybe the professional world that I was working in. At the time, I was just living up in Maine and really enjoyed sports, and specifically my favorite team, the Boston Celtics, except the Celtics were the worst sports team in New England at the time, and nobody really wanted to talk about them. So it became a pretty easy decision to sort of create a format for people to be able to come and talk about the show. And actually, originally, it was a live toll-free call-in webcast. So we bought some cheap equipment, got things off the ground. Obviously, technology has come a long way since then. The three of us just plug into computers and put on a headset, and away we go. It all started really with the love of a favorite sports team and trying to create a venue for people to talk about things. And, honestly, I think that translates very well to sterile processing and creating a similar venue for people to listen to the experts in the industry without having to go necessarily sign up or take a Saturday. They can do it on their own time and listen to the experts in the industry. I think sterile processing desperately needed a voice, and I feel like Beyond Clean really took that and ran with it. And I was just kind of meandering around LinkedIn when I found Hank and really just kind of took a shot in the dark with a LinkedIn message.
So, Hank, you probably get quite a few LinkedIn messages regularly. What made you take this one seriously?
That's a good question, yeah. Justin's not the only person I met through LinkedIn. I'd say probably 80% maybe of my professional contacts that I know in real life now came originally through LinkedIn, and that's just the power of that platform. But you're right, Mike, when I get this email from a guy never heard of, I don't know anything about who he is or what he's up to, I have to admit I chuckled because here I am, hate public speaking with a passion. And I'm not one of those that's just afraid of public speaking. I just don't really enjoy getting up in front of people and speaking, even though I love writing it and I love sharing my passion. Obviously, that's why I'm all over social media. So he reaches out to the one guy who's like, record my voice for posterity's sake? I don't know about that. One of my personal commitments in my professional life is to rarely, if ever, say no. So I said, yeah, let's have a phone call. Let's talk about what you're thinking. And the more that he shared his passion and the more that I thought about what is one of those truly untapped needs in the industry, I became convinced and a believer in this mission, that we talk about, the global mission to fight dirty and sterile processing. And it has been quite the ride from that first random message. And again, like we've shared this before, but I never met Justin in person until 8 or 9 months after we started recording the show. So to do all of this long distance, as Justin mentioned, the power of not only social media, but just technology to bring an industry together. This is really the time for this podcast, and it's been amazing to get to play a small part in making it happen.
Well, as amazing as it was that we did this podcast for 9 months before we met in person, I also hired Mike onto the company that we both work for without meeting him either. And we all met each other pretty much about a week apart 9 months later. So it does really say what a big impact social media has had on the way people do business, the way people find jobs, the way they get information. And also, Hank, I think when you and I first got on that first phone call, it was like, hey, we don't know how this will go. And I think I just said, look, I think the most important thing is if we're going to do this, that we make a commitment, that we be consistent with that commitment, and that we really ride it out for a certain period of time to see what it might be. And again, I feel like the response was much quicker than anticipated. I think a lot of that has to do with that network that you have built on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, et cetera, Hank. The thing that was really an unknown for me was, am I going to spend all this time trying to get this off the ground and then the consistency won't be there or the commitment won't be there? And I really have to just commend the both of you and really the entire team of just the fact that we just so regularly have continued to develop content, to source interviews, to do different things, because that's really what it takes to do a good job with podcasting.
Yeah, you're right. It is 99% commitment, just showing up, I think is the quote. There are those days and weeks, that it's been a hard week. We got a lot of other stuff going on. And then here it comes to Monday night, typically when we did the recordings. And it's like, okay, take a step back from all the craziness and just know this is Monday night. This is what we've committed to. And we're a part of something, that's bigger than ourselves. We've got an audience now around the globe who's waiting every week for these new episodes to come out. And it was a passion, yes, but it also, it became a good burden to know that there are folks who are excited about what's coming, who know that it should be there. Nothing, that'll get you out of the bed in the morning, knowing that so many folks are saying, hey, I want to know what you have to say this week, and I want to hear, who you're bringing on the show to teach us. And that really, it's been an amazing experience, like I said.
I think the last thing I want to say on that whole getting off the ground subject is just a thanks to Nick Gelso from CLNS Media, who's been a good friend of mine since back in the Celtics podcasting days, and somebody that I recommended. They passed the credentials that I earned with the organization on to him, and he's been able to build the network off of that, and he's been hosting our podcast at no charge for the entire year. He's been a big supporter of our passion and our efforts, and so it really we'd be remiss if we didn't throw some thank you and some kudos his way.
Sterile processing itself has very little ability to affect the problem of dried soils. It's really all the other departments that must work together to help Central Sterile to have a better process when the instrumentation finally arrives.
I think as healthcare workers, we're blessed to be in a situation where we're in a facility where we work, and if we're able to be a patient in that facility, unlike the general public, we know what's happening in that facility. We know the doctors, we know the OR staff, we know the anesthesiologist, we know everybody that's there. And for lack of a better term, essentially you're a VIP patient, which is what I think every patient should be.
Sterile processing is such a vital function to patient care and safety, but from what I hear, the vast majority of healthcare leaders just don't understand its value, and therefore they don't want to invest in its people, processes, or technology.
So the podcast wasn't the only first for us in 2017 into 18 as we did our first 52 weeks on air, I guess we could say. But another thing, we really tried to push our boundaries and set up a live event, which wound up being the first Beyond Clean panel discussion at Isham's 2018 conference and expo. And so, Hank, maybe you want to do the lead in on this, because I think this was your idea from the beginning.
Yeah, sure. So as a sterile processing manager and director, there were so many times that I was confronted with competing claims, and not just with this particular topic, but competing claims out there in the vendor world between products and services, and ours does this and this other one doesn't do that the way that we do it. And it just became overwhelming, and there was no place to go for a true comparison. You ask, one sales guy, you get the sales pitch or the marketing spiel, but there really wasn't any way to bring them all together and say, okay, you say this about this, but what is this other guy's response hearing you say that? And so I had been walking around for a couple of years, with this idea to have a roundtable discussion about various topics, but this first one that we picked for the first live event was the big packaging method debates, and we called it the myth-busting event. Frankly, That live event was a huge gamble for us. We had no idea if we'd be able to find guests who would be willing to debate all these competing claims in public. We didn't know if we'd even be able to get a room at the convention center for the national convention. And even if we did, we didn't know if anyone would show up to the live event. After all, up until that time, we were just a podcast. These random guys who hadn't even met before. And now we're hosting a live event. We bet on the one thing that I think has really set us apart in the industry, and that is our commitment to serve as a platform to ask honest questions about real challenges that are facing our industry. And we did it in public, and as we always do, we did it for free for anyone who could get in the door. And it's like with our podcast every week, anyone who has headphones and access to the internet. At this live event, that bet paid off big time for us. We had over 100 live attendees from across the spectrum of sterile processing professionals, a tremendously informative dialogue between industry experts who came very well prepared, and the highest single downloaded episode of our entire first year was that myth-busting episode when it came out later for the recording. All of our feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with almost immediate request for when's the next live event? What are y'all doing next for the Beyond Clean myth-busting? I'd say, Mike, that's a pretty good success.
Oh, it was a tremendous success. I know that going into it, we all had our different panic moments. I remember mine in particular happened about an hour before the show actually started when we're in this conference room, got all those empty chairs set up, and we're just sitting there waiting. Immediately, I have this panic of, what if no one actually shows up? Now, I know we had 150 people say that they were going to show up, but what if all of them just decide, no, never mind. And we're just hanging out here with nothing going on. But of course, like you said, that's not what happened at all. People showed up. The room was full. There were people standing in the back. And I can honestly tell you that we're not exaggerating when we say that people were sitting on the edges of their seats for the entirety of that program. And even just hearing the gasps that people had when we told them that we only have a few questions left or that's the end of the program. And they were genuinely shocked. They were so into it that they were shocked the time had gone by so quickly. And I can say that time may have gone by quickly for them, but for us, you and me, Hank, when we were moderating, time was not going by quickly. We were really sweating up there.
I was just sitting there with the bell and the timer on my phone trying to make sure that everybody was treated 100% equally and fair, which ties right into my first freak out moment was probably in early March, long before we got to the event, when I kind of told a colleague, not who works for the same company as me, but somebody in the area, I said, yeah, these are the people that are going to be on the panel and this is going to be the topic. And they looked at me square in the eye and said, I don't know why you would do that. So that's when I started to get a little nervous. I thought we might have an uncontrollable situation on our hands. It could get volatile and we might not even know. And it obviously didn't. All of the panelists did an amazing job. I think part of it had to do with preparation as well. And we let everybody know these are the questions and you can prepare ahead of time. But if you ask the people who are in the audience, they'll tell you that it was a very tense event and they were sitting on the edge of their seats. And for that, Hank, you really nailed what you were hoping to achieve with the event, which was to really get some people into a room to have a difficult discussion and really lay it out there. And I think for that, we very much accomplished the goal.
Yeah, and that goes back to the mission of the podcast, and we've thrown this out, here and there over the year, but it's a podcast about the people of sterile processing, the processes to drive quality on a consistent basis. But that third P are the products and services that are really innovative in the industry that are driving patient safety. In that live myth-busting event, it was primarily about those competing product claims, and it is important. And obviously, your friend, who you talked to before the show, and then obviously all the audience in the midst of the live event, they realize the importance of these questions. And even though we didn't walk away declaring a winner, although the folks were calling us to say, who won? It's more important for us in that setting to share that education, to ask, again, the questions that no one else before us had been asking, and definitely not in that format. But kudos, again, to our fantastic guests who said yes. He said, yes, I'm willing to go into this thing that no one's ever done before. They didn't know how it's going to go. They didn't know how folks are going to respond or how we're going to handle the moderation and the questioning. Again, the guests came through for us and provided tremendous content, and all of us are in agreement. That's the first, but it will not be the last of our live Beyond Clean events.
I have to add and pick on Mike a little bit, but there was a moment where one of the panelists asked for additional time, and it was very early in the panel, and Mike, you showed your strength in moderation at the event that kind of surprised us all. It was important that everybody have the same amount of time and that there was structure in the event. You showed a different side of yourself.
I almost passed out at that moment. So it was purely just had no idea what I was going to say. It just came out. So I'm glad it wasn't wrong or obscene, because that's usually what just happens. But it actually worked out really well.
Now, since we're giving kudos, though, I can't let this segment in without saying Justin did a tremendous job holding up the time cards for those of y'all who were not at the live event. We started calling Vanna White in private on the podcast, but he is the best time card holder in the country, bar none. I can guarantee it.
Augmented reality also allows you to create a telepresence link where you can link up directly with the service center and talk to the most experienced engineers that will see exactly the same thing that you see at the same time.
There's a decision to make. Either we're going to pay on the front end and let's hire the staff to get the job done, or you're going to pay on the back end and these patients sue you because you did something wrong and you didn't follow the IOU.
I think there just has to be stronger support there to help these chapters get through these transitions, as well as just continuing to help them gain strength in their territory, in their area.
The work is not going to go away. And only a short-sighted administrator or leader will start cutting back on those people that are so critical to eliminating the risk and assuring safety from infectious disease. You'd be an idiot to get rid of those people.
Well, all right. So from the past year, we all have different random memories, and maybe it's from an interview, maybe it's interactions, but I will tell you some of my favorite memories are really just how much fun we've had on this show. And people don't ever hear this because we always edit it out, but I'm notorious for getting into giggling fits where I cannot regain my composure for several minutes before we get started again. And considering we record these late at night, I have to commend the both of you for being able to put up with me through that, because I'm definitely losing it. Those giggling fits I can't get my composure back. One of them also came after we were coining some interesting phrases like future-looking goggles. I don't even remember if that one made it on to the episode, but I think it did. I think we let future-looking goggles roll, although I don't think anybody knows what future-looking goggles look like, and maybe it's kind of like Google Glass. And then one of the giggling fits really came from one of our guests, which is Pavel Sternberg de Stoyalovsky, who, for whatever reason, and this was the other thing, I would always get nervous about saying people's names wrong, but Pavel Sternberg de Stoyalovsky, which I've now said twice successfully, was by far the most difficult for me to say. I think we even have a clip that we'll share with everybody. We did something similar with Paul de Sternberg Stoyakovich a while back about augmented. No.
Hold on. You have to redo that.
It's his name. It's Paul Sternberg de Stoyakovich. Where does the day go?
No, Stoyalovsky.
Stoyalovsky.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. I tried to.
And where's the day? Is it Paul Stoyalovsky day? No. Paul.
No, it's Paul de Sternberg
Stoyalovsky.
No.
Okay.
Oh, wait, let me look. Hold on. Because we got to get this right.
It is. It's de Sternberg.
It is de Sternberg. Okay.
Paul de Sternberg. Okay, here we go. I'll say it again. Paul de Sternberg Stoyakovich, in talking about augmented reality.
No.
Stoyalovsky.
Here, I'm going to copy and paste it into the chat.
Oh, dude.
This is not you, John. This is not you. It's Justin.
All right. Paul de Sternberg Stoyalovsky. I got it. I'm on this. That was by far the most difficult one to say. I definitely botched it several times and had to re-record it. There's a lot of pressure in having an esteemed guest on the show, and then knowing that if you say their name wrong, that it could be quite insulting. For anybody that over the year that I may have botched your name, I think I struggled a little bit early on with Allison Sonstally, but that one's, rolling right off my tongue now. There's something about the pressure in the moment to say one's name properly that seemed to get me kind of tied up occasionally, especially in the early going or when I was lacking sleep. Hank, what's some of your memories from the past year?
Oh, man. Well, got a lot of aha moments. I'm not one to hide the fact that I am surprised or excited on the show, I think. So, for those who are regular listeners, you probably remember when I was like, oh, my gosh, I've never heard that before. That's crazy. I know one of the big ones was early on in our episodes when we were talking about the value of surgeon and vendor relationships with Canobody. And he mentioned not the tens of thousands of dollars that relationship is valued at or $1 million, but the millions of dollars over the lifetime of a surgeon at these vendor companies place on that surgeon sticking with a particular vendor for their implants, for instance. Totally breathtaking. Another big aha moment was the first ever candidate spotlight that we were able to do for the Isham presidential election this year. Had a lot of fun getting both of those candidates on to share their platform in this setting. That was a blast. One of the other big ones that I came away with was actually from Jim Stabinsky's episode talking about credentialing in a perioperative setting. And we were pushing him about trying to get research that supports certification in sterile processing and really pushing that across the United States. But he made an interesting point where he said, listen, sterile processing is actually ahead of the curve when it comes to mandating certifications as compared to nursing because there's currently no state in the union that requires certification for nursing, such as the CNOR. So even though we feel like we have a long way to go in sterile processing, that was one of those big,
Because I can tell you for nursing, no state in the union is it mandatory that you be certified in nursing to practice. None. So your profession is actually ahead of nursing.
Good point, Jim. Really take some pride. We do have a long way to go. We're slowly taking steps to get there.
Mike, what are some of the better memories for you over the last year? You joined us, in October? I think we only had a month or a month and a half maybe into the podcast before you joined the team.
Yeah, probably one of the first things that happened whenever I came on and started being a co-host was I believe my first interview was with Pavel. I was on the tail end of a really nasty head cold and had contracted a bit of a cough along the way, and I was constantly having to mute and unmute to make up for the coughing fits. I remember one particular time Pavel was, halfway through a really in-depth answer and I forgot to hit the mute button and just went into a terrible coughing fit. Everything just stops and Pavel it's almost like you could hear him looking over and saying, well, are you okay? I remember just feeling so bad about that I'd interrupted that train of thought and he had to start over. I remember that very, very clearly. As far as the really kind of eye-opening segments that I remember one particular one with Harry Mullen where he talked about that there are training schools out there that are charging just obscene amounts of money for certification in sterile processing. And that's one of the kind of aha moments that I had that, our podcast could very much be playing an important role in protecting people from getting involved with some of these more predatory, agencies that are charging just an absolutely exorbitant amount of money to enter into this industry when there are much more economical options out there. So I never really thought about that before, that we could really be protecting people with the information that we're providing.
I like to have fun, and that's why most of my memories are humorous. But I will say, if there was an aha one for me, it was Dr. Peter Nickel when he said that he did a study of his own instrument trays and found that he was only using about 14% of the instruments in each set. I just thought that was really incredible. And then looking at the waste that was going on and how much time it would take for someone in sterile processing to look at all the instruments that weren't used and what kind of an impact that would have on efficiency and the level of inspection and detail they could do on the instruments that actually were being used. So that one was a big one that stood out for me.
It became extremely clear right away that I can rent a brand new container of your choice between 35 to 65% less than what it's currently costing you to use the Blue Wrap.
Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm going to go be a sterile processing tech and I'm going to do a really crummy job today. You know, we learn from those who train us. And maybe it was that way 10, 15 years ago, and we haven't really looked at the manufacturer's guidelines. We haven't stayed up to date on evidence-based practices such as your AAMI guidelines, your AORN guidelines. It's kind of evolved that with that additional knowledge, they started uncovering processes that were broken. And with those came more findings.
First of all, I'm very impressed with the fact that you had RO feeding your boilers. That's very rare, and that's something that I think people should start to consider doing.
We need to know what's causing a blood clot. We need to know what's causing a granuloma. We need to know why that darn adhesion formed in the first place and obstructed that bowel. It's something we have to have a burning desire to understand and alleviate.
Okay, now we want to do something we don't often do, which is share some interesting statistics about the podcast for any of our listeners who might be interested. Hank, I'll kind of let you kick this one off talking about downloads in the various countries across the world.
Sure, yeah. So I just want to start by saying we had no idea how big this thing was going to get. As you said, Justin, at the beginning of the show, we really just committed to recording and, being consistent, get a good content out there, and then we'll just see how it goes. But there was no idea of the global scope it was going to take on, But a good example of that is even with our inaugural episode with Mike, it was downloaded in 6 countries, almost right off the bat, 6 different countries across the globe. A year from there now for this episode, the Beyond Clean podcast has been downloaded in 115 countries across the globe. And many of those are actually on our Facebook page, and we can track them, through the analytics on there. But we've got folks from all over the place coming to Beyond Clean for that high quality education. Just huge surprise there, but a lot to be thankful for as well. Our top 10 countries in terms of year one downloads, we're going to start with number 10 in Ireland. Big shout out to Ireland out there. Number 9, Qatar. Number 8, India. Number 7, huge following in the Philippines. Number 6, all of our fans in the United Kingdom. Number 5, Australia. Number 4, the United Arab Emirates. Number 3, our neighbors to the north, and I don't mean Maine, Canada.
That's not even right, Hank.
Y'all are so far above. Yeah. 2, we got a huge fan base there in Saudi Arabia. And then number 1, bringing home the gold, the US of A. Thank you very much, folks. And I want to, speaking about the world, I do want to give a quick shout out here before I hand it off to you, Justin. One of the coolest experiences of this entire show have actually been hearing from our podcast fans and compatriots across the world in places like Brazil. We've got a great friend of the podcast down there named Rogerio Sicarelli. And he has been a huge proponent of the show from day one. Haven't met him in person yet, but it's going to happen. And then likewise, we've got another great fan in Qatar, Fawaz Hussein, been a big supporter of us all along, as well as Raymond Moore in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And, really seeing how all of these folks have used our Beyond Clean content to foster conversation and improvement and innovation in their own spaces has been such a humbling experience and very encouraging, to see that education really does change people's perception, and then ultimately it changes the impact of patient safety across the world. A lot of success there on the global scene, but Justin, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the specific markets in the U.S. Who in the U.S. of A. is really tuning in to Beyond Clean over year one?
All right. Well, your backyard comes in at number 10, Dallas-Fort Worth. Number 9. Yeah, there you go. See, you're carrying the torch in your backyard. That's good. I got to tell you though, Mike, there's no Little Rock, Arkansas.
Yeah, what the heck, Mike?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm working on it. Yeah, I'm working on it.
Call your friends and family.
Yeah.
There's
My mom
also
can only download it so many times.
You're also a regional educator of the Southeast, and I don't see there's no Southeast cities here either. So
wow.
You got to work on New Orleans. You got to get Tampa Bay going. You have to have some claim. Right now you have a claim to shame, but you need some claim to fame in this top 10.
That's okay. There's nowhere to go but up.
So it was a little bit of a spoiler alert there because I just ruled out everybody in the Southeast. But number 9 is Chicago, and there's a large Isham audience out there. Thank you, Isham, for all the support and all the listens. Then we're going to go with our nation's capital at number 8, Washington, D.C. And then back to back. Now, Hank just made that Canadian joke about Maine because he knows that's my true home state and where I grew up and was raised in the state of Maine. But I'm definitely bringing a lot to the table here, guys, because my now home state of Pennsylvania has got the next 2. And just behind a very large city in Pennsylvania is, yes, Dunder Mifflin's own Scranton, Pennsylvania. And it's actually combined Scranton, Wilkes-Barre as far as the market's concerned. But that's pretty incredible. And also, we had mentioned Nick Gelso earlier. He actually grew up in Scranton and lived there until he moved to Boston just 8 months ago. So pretty interesting that we're bringing it home in Scranton. I'm going to have to give a shout out to all of my friends at Regional Hospital of Scranton, as well as Moses Taylor and Geisinger South, Geisinger, Wyoming Valley, and Wilkes-Barre. Lots of great friends, including Geisinger Community Medical Center, which, just so you guys know, there in Scranton, I spent 2 of my 4 CCSVP shadow days at that hospital. So great stuff there in Scranton. And I have also, although it was in Philadelphia, been confused for Michael Scott. So there you go. There was a lady in an elevator who thought I was Michael Scott. And actually Michael Scott, not the actor, but the actual Michael Scott. So
I think that says more about her than you.
Yes, it definitely does. And I'm all for that. Coming in at number 6, Philadelphia. Now we move into New England with Boston. That comes in. And so for my Celtics fans out there being a little frustrated, coming in behind Los Angeles at number 4. Come on, Boston. Let's get back in the fight. Number 3, Detroit. Number 2, New York. And then I'm loving number 1 because they're competing with some big dogs out there in San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. And guess what? Our good friend Sean Flynn is out there in the Bay Area as we speak, working for Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. We had an awesome interview with him and his team after they built a stellar department. Love to see the representation out there. Mike, what do you got for top 5 downloaded episodes in the first year?
All right, so this is the one that a lot of people really ask about. They want to know what are our top shows. So, counting down in reverse order, number 5, Jay Hardingham with sterilization container rentals and other practical implications. Number 4, Kirthi Kannabuddy with vendor management, inventory, and technology. Number 3, Jenny Mandarino, Joint Commission accreditation and survey preparedness. Number 2, Peter Nickel, tray optimization and waste reduction. We've already talked about that episode once so far. That was a really big one. And number 1, the top listened to episode for the entire year is our first episode with me, Michael Matthews, So, yeah, that's really exciting stuff. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I read the numbers wrong. It's actually, no surprise, package myth busting. No surprise at all. In fact, I think we already mentioned that it was our top one ever. So, yeah, that's our top 5 episodes.
Well played, well played. See, guys, we got to put up with Mike not only every week, once a week, but Justin has to put up with him every day. So have mercy on him, please. I do want to wrap out this segment, though, and say we are still looking for the number one Beyond Clean fan in Iceland. A couple of months ago, we identified that we've got a listener there in Iceland. We're going to pitch a free Beyond Clean t-shirt if we can track them down. So, folks, if you're listening to the sound of my voice and you know who that person is or you are that person in Iceland, send us an email at hank@beyondclean.net and I will send the coolest t-shirt known to man right your way.
The first thing I want to point out is that no cleaning can happen on the clean side. That completely negates the purpose of the clean side. If you're cleaning on the clean side, it's now the dirty side.
China is starting to put more stringent guidelines for protecting workers than something we have here. You can die from just breathing regular air in China, but yet in hospitals, they're now mandating monitoring all of these chemicals.
If a hospital would outsource their sterile processing department to a company, what kind of demands would they have towards that company? They would have full traceability. They want everything on time. They got service level agreements. They got everything. You do it because it costs money. And then you have your SPD in the basement. It's your own family doing that, and all the rules are gone.
You know, we go and validate our own instructions for our own device, and it's trying to get out of that silo and maybe provide some guidance that, hey, this would be a lot easier if we just validated toward this AMI protocol than trying to come up with our own. I think it's a win-win-win. The regulators want it, healthcare facilities want it, medical device manufacturers want it. It's just not an easy thing to do.
All right, the final segment as we wrap up our first ever anniversary show, as episode 52 is almost in the books. We want to tell you what's coming up, what's ahead for Beyond Clean in year 2, including a format change, other opportunities for our listeners, and also a little bit of branding and marketing, Hank. So maybe take us there to begin this final segment.
All right, great. Yeah, so besides the question on, how'd y'all get started, or the questions, what's the most downloaded show so far, the number 3 question, if you will, is where can I get merchandise? We came out with a Beyond Clean t-shirt right around the time of the National Ischium Convention. Huge hit. I wore my shirt almost every day there in Phoenix and got a lot of compliments on it. It's great material. And obviously, it's a great logo. I think more than that, it gives folks the opportunity to represent with pride who they are as sterile processing professionals. And it's not just a United States brand, if you will, but this is a global mission that we're on to fight dirty every day, every instrument, every time. So the good news is, guys, the Beyond Clean store is now live, and you can find the link on our Facebook page, on our LinkedIn page, or at beyondclean.net. So far, we've got multiple designs on all kinds of different products, from t-shirts and hoodies to the cutest onesie in the world for all y'all who have little future sterile processing technicians at home. We got coffee mugs, travel mugs, water bottles. We even got a dog bandana that is branded with Beyond Clean, as well as the things that you could use at the office, such as a Beyond Clean mouse pad. We have buttons that you can put on your backpacks, tote bags, duffel bags, iPhone covers even. You name it, we have slapped a Beyond Clean brand on it. Tell y'all right now, just like with the podcast, we're not doing this merchandise store at all to make money. We're doing it to have fun, to give the opportunity for our listeners to represent the coolest podcast in the world. Please, if you're interested, to go check it out. Again, you can find the links all over all of our social media pages. By the way, though, the International Sterile Processing Week is coming up soon, so by the time you have the ability to go on and check it out, those are the perfect gifts for your manager. If you're a manager or director, those are the perfect gifts for your staff to give something really that they've never had before. So go check it out.
Nice job with the Beyond Clean store and swag, Hank. I know you put a lot of time into that and getting all of the logos set up and in the right format. So nice work. The t-shirt looks pretty awesome, I gotta tell you. Some other changes that are coming up this season, or I should say this year, is that we're going to move to a seasonal format. And I'm a big fan of shows like The Walking Dead, maybe an old one that people aren't as familiar with, 6 Feet Under. Netflix has got some good ones, Bloodline. I was a huge fan of Walter White and Breaking Bad. Of all of them out there, I think my new favorite series is going to be Beyond Clean, because we are changing the format. From now on, we will move to a seasonal format. So I guess we'll call year one season 1 with 52 episodes. We are going to be taking a little hiatus, about 5 weeks off, and then we're going to come back with our second season of 8 episodes. We'll have our third season after another 5-week break. We'll have 8 more episodes. I think everybody gets it. 8 episodes a quarter, 5-week break in between. We'll try to build it around the holidays a little bit. We have big plans for what we want to do with the show, and it requires a little bit more time commitment. And as Hank said, nobody's trying to get rich off the podcast by any means. And so we do this as a labor of love. We always have. And that requires a little bit more time for us to bring more value to the listeners. I'm going to let Mike talk about that in a second. But in that vein, I do want to let everybody know that if you are a company that's interested in sponsoring Beyond Clean, we will be taking sponsors for each of those 8 episode seasons. And there's a reason behind it. The reason is, Mike, that's your cue.
Probably the next most often asked question is, why can't we get the podcasts as credits for continuing education? Well, the good news is that what we will be doing in the 5-week breaks in between our 8 shows is getting CE approval for every single one of our podcasts. We will start with season 2, which will be season 2, and we will work back into the season 1 as well eventually as time and resources allow. But as you can imagine, it will take a pretty significant amount of time to get the formatting right and get it submitted for approvals and have a system in place where people can come in and verify that they did listen to the podcast and get their continuing education credit. But we are working on making that happen, and that will be happening. You can, in addition to getting the greatest information in the world, get continuing education credit for your certification. Along with that, like I said, it takes a lot of resources. So that is one of the primary reasons that Beyond Clean is opening up to sponsorships, because it isn't free to get continuing education credits approved. So we are opening up for sponsors so that it won't cost anything to our listeners. This will be a free service, which is something we're very, very excited about. If you think about it, 8 episodes per season. Isham requires 12 credits for your CRCST, or you can easily knock them all out in less than 2 seasons. It's just a really great service that we're very excited to offer to our listeners. Be sure, stay tuned to our social media, stay tuned to Facebook, to LinkedIn, to beyondclean.net for more information as we move forward with that.
Yeah, we should be back in the beginning of October, so keep an eye out. We will still be posting on social media. I know, Hank, you've done a really nice job of highlighting quotes from all of our guests over the past year, really saying some nice words about Beyond Clean and our efforts. And I really do believe that moving towards getting CEUs is going to be a huge value. And really, I think that's 32 CEUs a year. So even if you hold every single certification that Isham has to offer, I think that's 31 CEs. So we've basically covered all of your continuing educational credits to maintain all certifications if we pull this off this year. So just to echo Mike, would be really, really helpful if we could hear from some sponsors out there that will cover the cost of submitting for approval on this CE. We've already spoken to Isham and CBSPD about this, so we know they're on board. But at this point, we're just looking at getting the dollars raised. We got a ton of support for the live panel discussion. We had a number of sponsors for that event, and that was again to bring it so that everybody who was in attendance could attend for free. And once again, there was no money-making agenda there whatsoever. It's really about bringing value to the industry, and I can't stress that enough. And for all the people that continue to listen to the show, we've seen a steady increase in our listenership. I'd say based on where we were maybe about 6 months ago towards the end of 2017, we've doubled the number of listeners that we're getting for every show. So Beyond Clean continues to grow, and I just want to say we're really grateful for that because it is a labor of love, and all of you listening and giving us feedback and encouragement on social media is really the driving force for a continued effort. Hank, Mike, I don't know if you have any other things that you want to say as we wrap up the first season of Beyond Clean.
I'll just add on, I'm kind of the new guy here still, but I am just so grateful to you guys for bringing me on, for just be a part of this. And, obviously really grateful to the listeners as well. The kind of feedback that we get is really honestly just really humbling, and it just makes us want to go and do even more.
That's right, Mike. I am super excited about year 2 because if you would have asked Justin and I this time last year what our wildest dreams would have been for where the podcast would be in a year, I think I can speak for both of us to say that we would have undershot what the reality is. And if year 2 is anything like the growth that we've seen in year 1, and I'm not just talking about downloads, I'm talking about respect in the industry, engagement with the other folks out there who are tackling the challenges that we're facing every day on the front lines. It's going to be a blockbuster year number 2. It's only going to get bigger from here, especially as Justin said, with a new seasonal format that we can pour a lot of effort into some fantastic seasons to really bring some themes alive and cover it in a way that's exciting and educational at the same time. Let's get this going, guys. So just a real quick FYI, though, before we let you go, there will be that 5-week break. If you have missed any episodes over this last year, which I know, to be honest, some of y'all out there probably missed 1 or 2 here and there, that's a great opportunity to go back and catch up, as well as, spend that opportunity thinking about things you want to hear in these upcoming seasons and shoot us an email. We respond within 24 hours typically on our email and our Facebook page, so that's a great opportunity to engage, but actually bring the content that you want to hear in front of your team and the globe.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the first season of Beyond Clean. And as a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes or Stitcher, and now also on Google Play and Spotify. Simply search for Beyond Clean Podcast. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review on any of those platforms because your feedback is important to the show, as we so stressed in today's episode. If you have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode in a future season, or if you would like to share a picture anonymously on our Instagram page, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank, Mike, and myself, thank you for listening to the first season of Beyond Clean.